You're taking on way too much risk just to beat inflation. Man, I had a conversation with a guy today just a few minutes ago, and this guy said, I got to do a video, and I'm not going to tell you anything about him, of course, but he made such a good point. And I was like, dude, that is so spot on. So he's not much older than me. He's 55 or so, and he's locking up some money in annuities, fixed annuities, getting 4-5%, something like that. And he goes, the funny thing, Josh, is all these people, they don't realize that inflation is he said, when are you going to be done with your book? I want to read it. I said, and he goes, yeah, dude, because, all these people make this horrible mistake thinking they have to have a certain rate of return to beat inflation without knowing that inflation is a personal component. I said, dude, spot on, man, spot on. I was like, 100% right. Because he goes, he's got 2 kids, why would my kids have the same inflation rate as my mom? His mom is 82 years old. She's not working. She's living fine on Social Security. He helps out a little bit with some income and whatnot. But he's like, she doesn't spend anything. And my kids, on the other hand, they're going to have to buy a house. They're going to have to buy a car. They're going to have to get married. They're going to have kids, blah, blah, blah. He said there's to say CPI covers both these people in the same way doesn't make sense. I said, 100%, man. That's literally this construct of my book. He goes, so for me, I got no debt. No debt. I mean, we don't spend very much. I got no debt. So if I can get 4 and 5% guarantees, and then hear people say inflation is going to eat that guarantee alive, well, inflation, for who's inflation? Who's inflation? Of course, the counter is always, well, CPI. CPI doesn't measure inflation, for the love of me, man. So let me show what I'm talking about. This is for my book, and this is the breakdown of the 3. CPI-E, a CPI for the elderly, CPI-U, which is what we use, and CPI-W, which is what we used previous to 1978. And so you can see here at housing for CPI-E, all right, look at this, right there, green. Housing is 46% of a total CPI. All right, hold on a second. Let me just text my daughter. Okay. All right, so CPI-U, which is what most people would use, is right here, still over 40%. So 46% of inflation is based on your housing cost, all right? So let's keep looking. So the housing cost is actually 47.43% to be precise. 37.362% of that is shelter, all right? Of shelter, 4.6% is rent of your primary residence. Well, you're not renting your house, so you're not renting. You own your house. If you own it outright, there's no rent. So immediately we take out rent of primary residence. 37.62%, literally that's 37% of total CPI is shelter, of which almost 5% is renting. You're renting your residence, all right? So the other 37.362, which is shelter, rent is 4.62. Owner's equivalent rent of residencies, OER, is 31%. So basically, we get rid of this whole entire thing for shelter. Housing, 47% of CPI is housing, of which basically 80% of that 47% is renting or owner's equivalent rent, which is how much it costs to rent your own house to yourself. That's freaking stupid. Stupid. So now we go to transportation. Let's keep going. This is going to be from my book, by the way. Check it. The second biggest component of CPI-E, it's actually CPI-U as well, is transportation. Almost 15% of the entirety of CPI is transportation, which is the bulk of that is private transportation. The purchase of a new or used vehicle. Are you purchasing a new or used vehicle, Grandma? Are you doing it on an annual basis? Of course not. Now, motor fuel, we'd want to keep in there, obviously. Motor parts and equipment, we want to keep in that. But we're not buying a new car every year, Grandma. So why would that be part of our CPI? All right, that doesn't make any sense. So we keep coming down here. Let me just show what I'm talking about. And so what we do is we reduce transportation by the annual purchase of a new or used vehicle. So the CPI is 14.52%. We reduce it by half to 7.51, basically, because we're not purchasing a new or used vehicle every single year. The housing gets reduced from 47.43 to 10.07 because we don't have it. OER is just freaking stupid, and we're not renting either. So if you have 100%, which is current CPI, CPIE. So going to be CPIU is almost the exact same thing. Basically, CPI. Actually, I think I got it on here. If we look historically speaking, we got CPIE versus CPIU versus CPIW. The rates. Hold on a second. Let me just see here real quick. You're basically going to sneak right here. Yeah. So CPIE from 1982 to 2007 averaged 3.3. CPIU is 3.1 and CPIW is 3%. Anyway, so what happens here, if we go down to this guy right here, we keep going down to my graph with the introducing the reality CPI. All right, keep going right here. CPIE is 100%. We're actually only at 54.68% of that. Why? Because housing is much reduced. Transportation is much reduced, without question. Now we're going to get into a different thing where we're going to increase the cost of medical. We still got 11% for medical care. But anyway, I'll do that in another chapter, which I'll do another video on. But anyway, the point being is, so if you're saying, well, I got to keep up with inflation. Inflation is running at 5%. So if I only have a 5% rate of return, inherently I'm losing money because my 5% I got to pay tax on that. So let's just say a 20% tax. I'm only getting 4% and inflation is running at 5%. So I'm losing money. That's wrong. That's a wrong way to look at it. You're saying, no, my inflation rate is much lower than what's the post-inflation rate, because the post-inflation rate is based on CPI. And CPI uses OER, transportation, and renting. And I don't use any of those things, especially when I'm retired. So all that can kiss my big fat behind. So now I'm saying, okay, if I don't need to get the same rate of return, if my inflation is much lower than the stated rate, that means I don't need to get the same rate of return to keep up with inflation, which means what? Which means, check this out. All of a sudden, fixed annuities look a lot better now, don't they? Yes, they do. They look a lot better. If I can get $100,000 and get $4,250 a year at 4.25, and my inflation rate is significantly lower than what's stated, then I'm a lot better off without taking the risk, aren't I not? Yes, you are, because all of a sudden the fixed rates actually pay my bills and keep up with inflation, because inflation, my personal inflation rate, is much lower than the stated rate. Thus, you don't need to take on that much risk in retirement. Unless you're heavy in debt, but even then, if you're heavy in debt, you're still not renting your house. You're still not renting your house to yourself. You probably have a fixed rate mortgage. You see what I'm saying? It's freaking stupid, man. We've been lied to about the needing to take risk to beat inflation. It should tick you off, which is why my book is going to be a much needed source of reprieve for you about the fear mongers. All right, love your thoughts. We'll see you.